Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television, and it's that moment where we'll bring you our first conversation for the morning. After years of missed progress and setback for democratization, Africa needs stronger advances in building a more progressive, a more democratic, effective, and a more democratic governance vital to stability, peace for its 1.4 billion people. Nigeria, nearly 1/6 of all Africans, recently chose a new president in what has been described as Africa's most consequential election. The president-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who defeated Atiku Abubakar of the PDP, and Peter Obi of the Labour Party, has promised to heal and unify the country. With the elections concluded, power sharing formula has been brought to the front burner. The question now is, how inclusive will the next government be? We have in the studio a public affairs analyst, Mahmoud Ntata. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Very good morning.
And Ramadan Karim.
Same to you. Thank you very much.
Also joining us is the Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, Elijah Oyagba. He is joining us from Bujumbura, Burundi. He is a member of the APC. Good morning.
Good morning, and Ramadan Karim to all of you.
Thank you very much. We are also expected to join us very shortly, Mrs. Dorothy Nuhu Akenova. She was a presidential aspirant under the platform of the XDP. She will be the woman's voice on the show this morning. We begin with our guests in the studio, Malan Ntata. We have seen how the election had gone in Nigeria, and as the introduction suggests, we have come to that point where we now need to face the critical responsibility of devolving what is left, especially the appointive positions, to every nooks and cranny of this country in a bid to create a sense of collectivism, more like every unit feeling that they are a part of this country. However, we are beginning to see voices from places that similar to where the people who had won this election as a match also yearning to take up some of those key positions. What is your idea of power sharing to start with?
Well, for any democracy to strive, and for there to be stability, and for there to be mutual understanding, courtesy demands that every position, whether from the security angle, whether from civil service, whether from ministerial, whether headship of extra ministerial, parastatal, ambassadorial, and others, are shared equally. But sometimes they say the winner takes it all, because I will take example from the incumbent administration of Muhammadu Buhari. If you look at the security setup, especially the higher echelons, the chiefs of army, naval, air, and including even the Inspector General of Police, you can see that the Chief of Army Staff comes from the north, particularly northwest, Inspector General of Police, northeast, Chief of Naval Staff, northwest, Director General DSS, northwest, Immigration, northwest, and host of others. So with this practice, when the incoming president takes over, he might decide to say, okay, since this was the practice of my immediate predecessor, let me also satisfy my region by way of giving the key security position to my geopolitical zone. So also other areas. But as regards headship of ministries, which is ministerial appointments, it is done according to through federal character representation. Sometimes some states are favored with 2 ministers. Like Kwara, for instance, now you see Lai Mohammed is a full-fledged minister, substantive minister from Kwara. Gbemisola Saraki, Minister of State. Then there are others like that too. So in the playing of a true game, courtesy demands what you are given to Kogi, Kano should be able to get it. What you are given to Abia, Enugu should be able to get it. What you are given to Ondo, Ogun also should be able to get it. But there are certain invisible parastatals. When I say invisible, there are certain parastatals that are there that even when there are more than 30 people from one state, and then people wouldn't know because the agitation and concentration is always on certain juicy positions. If you are talking about Director General of MPA, NIMASA, and all these grade A parastatals, you see the kind of competition, and no president would like to give these parastatals to anyone not trusted, irrespective of the part of the country he or she hails from.
All right, Ambassador Yagba, I'm compelled to ask you this question because you had a third-person perspective, some would say, of the elections conducted in Nigeria from February 25th to March the 18th. What is your perspective and perhaps that of the international community, to the just concluded elections? What are they saying? Was it free and fair? Was it up to expectation? What are they saying so far?
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians, and Ramadan Kareem once again. First, I'd like to start by congratulating the President-elect, His Excellency Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu, on his election. The truth is that we've actually run a bitter campaign as politicians in Nigeria. And like you heard from the President-elect, that it is now time to heal and move the nation forward. This is also an election that for the first time in Nigeria, we witnessed a three-horse race, if I have to put it that way. Before now, you basically would have just two major candidates in every election. This has happened in Nigeria. And the last, in fact, from 1989. Can I go ahead?
Yes. Please go ahead.
Yes, and what we observed in this last election is that we now have three major candidates that were coming from the three major tribes in Nigeria. And it basically meant that there were, a lot of issues, support-based, differed from one candidate to the other. But at the end of the day, the elections have come and gone, and not just the presidential elections, the National Assembly elections, the governorship elections, and that of the State House of Assemblies have almost come and gone, bearing what happens in I think Adamawa and Kebbi. The elections are virtually concluded in most parts of the country. And it is now time for us to move forward. Of course, during the elections, there were international community observers, there were, civil society organizations, there were NGOs that did monitor the elections. Without a doubt, there were a few observations of skirmishes here and there. There were issues, of voter suppression here and there. But the truth of the matter is that even in the most developed democracy in the world, you cannot find an election that is free of any kind of issues, even in America. And in fact, in the last concluded elections, there were recounting that took place in places like Georgia and all of that. So there will always be issues with elections, and that's why it's democracy. Nigeria is, we're just about 20-something years, and we will keep moving, and these things will keep getting better and better. Let's also not pretend as if we don't know where we're coming from. We're coming from a situation where election results were being written and the elections were still going on, and then results were being announced, to a point where people had to multiply thumbprint ballot boxes, and today those kind of stories are the things of what you can refer to as a thing of the past. And of course there are still issues here and there, but on the average, I think, and even the international community obviously looked at it and observed these anomalies, but still would not withhold the legitimacy of the elections. Right. The law of the land requires that, or provides that if there are issues with the elections, that whoever that feel aggrieved, there are legal and legitimate processes of trying to get these issues addressed.
All right.
So we will move on to the next, to the next platform, which is basically the judiciary, to try to step in and address some of the issues that some of the grievances that people have in the course of the elections. But other than that, I think as a nation we have made progress, and we are looking forward to a good administration, much better and much more progressive than what we have as it is today.
Okay, Ambassador, if I may follow up very quickly before we come back to Malam Dantata in the studio. The president-elect had talked about the need to start healing, and a lot of observers and analysts, home and abroad, have talked about a healing that the healing would begin with what would seem like a representative government, a government where every nook and cranny of this country will feel a part of. How do you think, with regards to talking about that healing, how do you think he should go about his appointment, bearing this diversity, the problem of managing our diversity in mind?
Oh, thank you very much. A very important question. And, before I left Nigeria, I was actually actively involved in a larger house discussion on power sharing and going forward into governance by President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You know that Nigeria is a secular state, and you know that Nigeria is a nation with multiple tribes. And of course, speaking over 250 languages. The hallmark of democracy is inclusion. And I had Malam Dantata actually talking about ensuring inclusivity in governance. And clearly, without a doubt, this is one of the things that will be able to, that should drive the next administration, because you can argue that the president-elect didn't win majority of the vote. It was 8.7 million out of the 24 that was, out of 24 million Nigerians. But you can also argue that he also won just on the account of the fact that the opposition also didn't unite. So technically, what you can also say is that majority of the voters that voted didn't vote for him. So this is what it means, that he will now have to do a lot of work to ensure that Nigerians, or every nook and cranny of the country, is carried along. There are appointive position, ministers and all of that. And I had Malam Dantata talk about it. The reason why we had two ministers from states like Kwara, from states like Anambra, is not because two ministers were just selected from that state and not given to another state. It's because the Constitution requires that a minister must come from each of the 36 states of the Federation. But again, there was also another slot that was created for geopolitical zones, meaning that you have 36 ministers and you now have another 6 from each of the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. And those ministers must be selected from a state. So any state that they pick, in the course of that, selection process, it will not look as if they have 2. But actually, the second slot is actually for the geopolitical zone, not the second slot for the states. But having said that, there are positions like the National Assembly positions, the number 3 man, the number 4 man, and their deputies. What I would expect to see is that I would expect to have those other 4 positions. Already there is president from the southwest, there is vice president from the northeast. We will expect to see that the Senate President, Deputy Senate President, Speaker, Deputy Speaker, one comes from the north, the other one comes from the south, and then their deputies will also come from the 2 remaining zones. This in itself will give a sense of inclusivity, knowing that the number 1 president, vice, Senate President, Deputy, Speaker, Deputy is now being occupied by members of the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. This is, if you like, call it a step in the right direction. We will now begin to look at positions in the security architecture. We'll now begin to look at positions relating to the secretary to the government of the federation. And then, indeed, a lot of other important positions in the country. Like I said, competence is an issue here. We will not also select people on the account of the fact that they are coming from here or they are coming from here. Competence will also be important, because I believe that in Nigeria, we have competent people from all the tribes in this country. And therefore, the ruling party, which I'm a member of, must put this, at the front burner I believe that the Senate president of a country, personally, my opinion, should come from the southern part of the country, either the south or the southeast, even though I have preference for the southeast. And if you look at 1999, when Obasanjo was the president, it's almost the same thing that played out. You know, if you look at the way the power was shared across the country, it created if you like, call it a sense of inclusion across the length and breadth of the country. And that is one of the first things that the president-elect must begin to look at. And then, obviously, I will also, because I'm an advocate for the youth, I will also talk about even the inclusion of the young people in this government. Because if you look at the first speech the president-elect made on the night of his declaration, he said, "The youth of Nigeria, I heard you and I heard you loud and clear." He made that statement twice, meaning that he expects, or that the Nigerian youth have spoken very loudly, and we believe that even the women as well should also be involved in governance. And these are, you know, the president-elect is a politician, and I believe he will do the needful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Before I ask the next question, while Ambassador Onyago was talking, we were joined by Mrs. Dorothy Nuhu Akenova. She was a former presidential candidate of the Social Democratic Party, SDP. Welcome to the program, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So, Mr. Dantata, I want to ask this question pertaining to not the process, but the outcome. Now, while we answer questions around how the process was conducted, there's no gainsaying that right now the polity has not been as polarized as ever before. Now, I'm talking about not just the electorate, but also politicians and the outcome of the election, such that we are seeing new players coming into the game. I'm talking about the Labour Party, I'm talking about the NNPP, and other parties who were in the game earlier, but also won, you know, some states or some seats across the different geopolitical zones and states. Now, what does this portend for Nigeria's democracy?
It is signaling a wind of change. It is wiping away politics of originality. It is wiping away politics of customized godfatherism and host of others. Let me take examples of Kano and Abia, where Alex Otti and Abba Gida Gida won. NNPP has been a party existing before Kwankwaso came and pulled all his followers to further capacitate it. A lot of people were still skeptical and jittery as to whether the NNPP can win governorship election in Kano. With all the might, with all the power of incumbency and all the devices and host of other things orchestrated, they still delivered. Also in Abia, PDP was there, even with the governor still yet to hand over in May, but you saw what happened there. Then look at the case of a young guy who was just 5 years old, defeated the Speaker of Yobe State House of Assembly, who has been there for 20 years. The boy was just 5 years when the man was in the State Assembly, and he made that. Look at others. SDP had their own senators, Wadada, a one-time House of Reps member, and host of others. So that is to tell you, if we look beyond just the leading parties like the PDP and APC, we can achieve. What Nigerians are now saying is that we are tired of name dropping. We are tired of attaching ourselves to particular established personalities. We now want individuals who can go there, come to deliver dividends of democracy, defend our thoughts and rights, and also fight for certain things that are affecting the society. Because if you look at whatever, multi-party system gives room for popular participation. If, for example, my colleague here, who was once a presidential candidate of SDP, were there not to be parties like SDP, Labour Party and others, maybe it would have been difficult for her to even penetrate the PDP or APC. But the existence of SDP and other parties gave her that opportunity. And you cannot wipe away our name from chronicle of people that have been presidential candidates of that party.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yes.
It's interesting this is coming to you. I mean, he practically led the conversation to your doorstep. And it's interesting because we're the focus for us is how to manage our diversity post-election, how to share the spoils of war, which it appears we have not done very well with in recent history, how to then make everybody feel a part of governance, whether or not the figures indicate that they voted for this, how to avoid the 97.5 question and begin to build a nation away from the ethnic and religious rhetorics, heavy rhetorics that we saw during the election. From our experience, what kind of tax do you think lies ahead of the president-elect, especially in his quest to heal? The ambassador spoke largely to what needs to be done. I would like to get your perspective as a mother and as a woman.
I think the task is very Herculean because we've never been as polarized as we are right now. The way that people have been made to feel different from others has been really deep. And we have all tested it in one way or the other. The Muslim campaign was heated on both sides. And it felt as though there were just Muslims and Christians in Nigeria. There are others, and they weren't even mentioned or considered. So imagine how way out of the process they would be feeling. You know, so the task is Herculean. And fortunately, we have someone who has been in the political scene for decades, who picked the presidential ticket. Ordinarily, it shouldn't really matter, because from the state level to the grassroots level, we are supposed to be seeing inclusion. Unfortunately, we operate a hierarchical society, which means that the top has most of the responsibility and has most of the power. So eyes are looking up to the president, and we are counting on the experience that he has for working with diversity, because he exhibited that in Lagos. He had women in appointment, he had people from diverse regions in appointments within the state. And that shows that if he can replicate that spirit at the federal level, we would be very, very assuaged. I've had people talk about inclusion in terms of regions and in terms of age, you know, bringing youth on board. There's hardly ever a time, except in the passing, that the other half of the population is mentioned, which is the women. And we have to start to look at women. Since 1995, Nigeria has been a signatory to the Beijing conference and subsequent reviews of that conference and other affiliated conferences that affirm the Beijing, including the SDGs. Unfortunately, we don't see the benefits of that signature that Nigeria appended. And so it behoves on the people who have been elected to ensure that in appointive positions, we see a minimum of 35%. It is ridiculous that I saw 3.5% for the people, women elected into the National Assembly, 3.5. Maybe we are making a mistake. Beijing didn't say 3.5. Beijing said 35%. So let's remove the point in the middle and let's start from where we signed.
All right, Mrs. Akinova, this election has brought in a couple of firsts. We've seen the NNPP win its first state after just 9 months of operation as a political party. We've seen the Labour Party also win its first state, Abia State. And in the National Assembly, this is actually going to be the first time around 7 political parties will be holding sway, with none of them holding an absolute majority, which means that they would have to work together in the best interest of Nigeria, as it were. And while we are waiting the elections results to come in, I'm talking about Adamawa State for women to, actually celebrate probably for the first time having a female governor in Nigeria who would serve elected a 4-year term. We've also seen, after the announcement of results, some women emerge deputy governorship candidates. So if you compare this to the 3.5% you have in the National Assembly, would you call this a win, sort of, or moving forward and making progress?
No, there is always a win. There is always progress made. If we even judge from how many people aspired, there is a win, because there is no way these experiences are going to go away. And my colleague has already mentioned it, that once it's written, is there. Records will remain. People will keep referring to what has happened. It is always a win. The question is, at the point at which we are, globally speaking, at the point at which we are, as citizens, with our exposure, with our education, with our expectations, did we perform up to expectation? And that is where our breath is taken out of us, because we expect to have performed a lot better than we do. If countries like Rwanda have hit parity after healing from war, what is wrong with us in Nigeria? That with the way we are known and named Giant of Africa, like the biggest black nation in the world, everybody is looking up to us to show the way. Why don't we just show the way?
Interesting. Ambassador, coming back to you and taking up from where Mrs. Dorothy stopped, what kind of challenge do you think we have trying to deliberately achieve that diversity? And I say this in the light of our experiences, cumulative experiences up to this time. So what happens is we try to practice the minorities have their says and the majorities have their way. And in doing that, when we want to cascade positions down, we sort of say we couldn't find anybody from a state because they likely went to other political party and end up bringing people, right, to fill slots that the states do not feel a part of. In other words, because you could tell that they are citizens of a particular state, even though they have stayed away their entire life in another place but participated in politics, you bring them in and foist them on the people and sort of create the impression that they now represent the slot that is coming from that state. Is that a practice you think we should continue? How do we find the fine balance between appointing people that would reflect the wishes of the people at the grassroots and not throwing away competence?
Thank you very much, my brother. Let me start by congratulating Mrs. Dorothy, who actually aspired under the platform of the SDP. The glory actually and analyzing. It's talk is cheap. When you get to the field and you get your hands soiled, you get your shirts dirtied, that's when you get the experience. So, madam, I do congratulate you. And that I said to you that you are already an asset to the nation. So keep on keeping on. And let me also correct an impression that even though Labour Party won Abia State, this is not the first time Labour Party is winning an election in Nigeria. Governor Segun Mimiko actually ruled Ondo State under Labour Party. So I just wanted to set these two records straight. Then coming back to the issue, I think that particularly we haven't done, yes, we've made progress in women inclusion, but I don't think that we have done very, very well. She did mention Rwanda. I'm Nigeria's ambassador to the Republic of Burundi. And here, in the party constitution, the Senate here is 2 per state, or what they call province here. And it's in the constitution of every party that the 2 senators that must come from a state, one must be from the other tribe and one must be from the other gender. What am I saying? I'm saying that in Burundi here, the senators here is shared 50-50 tribe and gender. So, so what is difficult in political parties in Nigeria, doing a whole lot much more, saying you're giving the women food free funds to buy. And I also would like to say that even the women themselves must also cultivate the habit of supporting women. Women must also support women. If you look at the demographics, we know what the numbers say. We know what the numbers say. So to that extent, I think that the women fold must also do a lot of work in supporting one another. However, time to look at the renewed hope document of His Excellency Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu. He clearly said that a certain percentage of his political appointees will be women. He clearly says that a certain number, for the young people, I'll say about 4 of his cabinet members must be under the age of 40. These are specific, objectives that he has mentioned, and they are actually realistic and achievable. So we will begin to look at the implementation of this. And most importantly, like, we've always talked about, we have a politician that is now the head of states. And we believe that all the experiences he's gathered over the years, building people, he won this election strictly on the fact that he had Muslims that voted for him, he had Christians that voted for him, he had Southerners that voted for him, he had Northerners that voted for him. So you can actually say that he actually has the support of a lot of Nigerians that voted in this election. And we are looking up to him to bring his experience to bear. That experience that actually ensures that there is inclusivity, both religion, both tribe, both gender, and even the age demographic, so that everybody in the country will feel as though they are part of what is going on. And in any case, even if you have people that are also extremely very good in other political parties, why not get them involved? We are talking about Project Nigeria here. We're not just talking about Project APC. We know that a lot of people work for the APC, but it's much more. Nigeria is now Nigeria should become the beneficiary. And to that extent, Nigeria is a nation that has 18 political parties that participated in the presidential election. Nobody should be left behind. Okay. Everybody must be brought to the table so we can move the nation forward. And that's what I'd like to see, with the incoming administration.
Okay, thank you so much. Madam Dantata, I'm compelled to ask you this. He spoke about the renewed hope manifesto of the president-elect, and also taking cues from the body language of the president-elect. He has been calling especially for calm, for unity, and for national healing. Perhaps could this be a better reason why he should form a government of national unity?
You see, when you look at the profile of Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu, politically, he was groomed by late General Shehu Musa Yar'Adua. A lot of people don't know, but we know this. The PDM, don't forget the fact that he and his co-contender from the PDP were all proteges of Shehu Musa Yar'Adua in PDM, even before the MKO Abiola of 93. So, and we all knew what late Shehu Musa Yar'Adua stood for during his political campaigns: unity, reconciliation, togetherness, and all of you. His speech to extend olive branch got the attention of even certain critics. The problem he has is foot soldiers, and we've been telling them, please call them to order. Look at, for example, Dere Alake. At the heat of it, he was calling for the arrest of a clergy, calling for the arrest of the spokesperson of the opposition party, PDP, which we condemned. For him, as Ahmed Bola Tinubu, Jagaban Borgo, let it interest you that Jagaban did not emanate from the southwest. It emanated from the north central, a town called Kainji, where you have the largest dam in Africa. And who gave him? His colleague in the Senate during the Third Republic, that is late Dantoro, who was emir of Borgu then. So people need to read through the lines and know history before commenting. So I think his take on government of reconciliation, national unity, we go a long way. And that was why in this your studio, we advised him, even if Atiku Abubakar or Peter Obi or Kwankwaso failed to come and congratulate him, let him go to them, which I believe he has done. At this time, especially with international community saying there were a lot of malpractices, rigging, and also other things, to dust the tension down, it needs to extend that olive branch. Obasanjo did it. Don't forget, people like late Bola Ige,
Yar'Adua as well.
They brought them to government. He added a strong, Yar'Adua as well.
That's right.
Bola Ige added Ministry of Power, a strong ministry for that matter. So if an Obasanjo that came to limelight because of being the first military head of state to pave way for democratic governance can do that, what more of a full-fledged political general? Because if I'm to grade him, I will make him four-star political general.
Thank you very much. I would like a final thought on the show, because time is not our friend to come from Ms. Dorothy. And she more than suits the bill to talk about equality or whatever you call it. moving away from the federal positions, what would be your charge to state governors? Because they also are the people who are closest to
Indeed, they have a role
to our citizens. They seem to be doing far worse than the center. It appears when we do a quick Snapchat check on most of them. For some of them, they have an entirely all-male dominated cabinet, and they don't even give respite to places where they think they are not wanted. What would be your charge to governors, especially the ones that are just coming on board?
I'm charging them to work and link their governance with the central so that the policies are in sync. If the political general is towing the line of equity, it behoves, that the states should go in sync with what the federal is doing. And I know, knowing the records of Bola Ahmed Tinubu, that he is going to have in place a monitoring mechanism that will ensure that the states perform, because he doesn't want to be kicked out after 4 years. Yes. I tell you, he has a big dream for Nigeria, like he did for Lagos. He needs time to roll it out, and the governors will do well if they work in sync.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wish we had more time to continue to drill on what appears to be very important to our fibers, to our structures. As a country, I want to thank you, Ambassador Elijah, for joining us all the way from Bujumbura. I hope that you are having a swell time there trying to attract people to motherland Nigeria. Thank you for all the perspective that you have brought to the show this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Member.
All right, to Mr. Mahmoud Dantata, a public affairs analyst, and to Mrs. Dorothy, it's a pleasure having you again, as always.
Thank you very much.
You brighten up our studio, in addition to the merit of very rich intellectual perspectives that you bring to our conversation.
Thank you very much.
We hope that when we come knocking again, you will not be tired of showing up.
No.
And to our viewers at home, let us also thank you for allowing us reach your living room free of charge. And sparing us your time to listen to the conversation. I hope at your own little level, you do the best you can to encourage inclusiveness in decision making in your family, inclusiveness in decision making across your local community. Until we come to you again with this show to look at several other areas of interest to you at home, we want to thank you for being a part of this show. I am Sunday Michael Ogu. Let's do this again tomorrow.
And I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Thanks for watching, and Ramadan Kareem.